Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're all having a great Saturday afternoon. Welcome to the Fort Collins Book Fest 5-year celebration. My name is Africa Garcia, and today we're celebrating the first 5 years of the Fort Collins Book Festival, a virtual celebration of books and brews, writings and riffs, food and thought, big science, and the great outdoors. As always, we're also celebrating the importance of literature, writing, books, and of course, our libraries. Please check out the virtual program at www.focobookfest.org. We have book talks, discussions, panels, and prose and poetry readings over these 2 weekends. And what's best is it's all free. Make sure you attend as many as you can, and please share with your family and friends. So before we get to our session, I would like to thank our sponsors. This festival could not happen without our generous sponsors. Today's event is produced by Poudre River Public Library District in partnership with CSU Morgan Library. Our presenting sponsor is City of Fort Collins Fort Fund. Further support has been provided by Friends of the Poudre Library District, Friends of Morgan Library, Lila B. Morgan Endowment Fund, Downtown Development Authority, Liga Johnson and Goodman, Front Range Community College, Downtown Fort Collins Creative District, Old Firehouse Books, and our media partners, KUNC and 105.5 The Colorado Sound. We'd like to give a special thanks to Northern Colorado Writers for presenting all 4 of our writers' workshops. Thank you to all of them. And thank you so much for supporting our 5th annual FOCO Book Festival. And without further delay, let's get to business. Today's session, Soulfire Farm, Uprooting Racism, Seeding Sovereignty, is brought to you by Naima Penniman. Naima Penman is a multidimensional artist, activist, healer, grower, and educator committed to planetary health and community resilience. She is the program director at Soulfire Farm, where she supports the next generation of BIPOC farmers with land-based education and mobilizes public support for food sovereignty through on and off farm training programs, speaking, and facilitation. She is the co-founder of Wild Seed Community Farm and Healing Village, a Black and Brown-led intentional community focused on ecological collaboration, transformative justice, and intergenerational responsibility. She is the co-founder, co-artistic director of Climbing Poetry, an internationally acclaimed performance duo that uses art as a tool for popular education, community activism, and personal transformation. Naima is also a Thai yoga massage practitioner who is a proud member of a collective of Black women-identified healers called Harriet's Apothecary. She's devoted to subverting injustice, igniting imagination, and cultivating collaborations that elevate the healing of our earth, ourselves, our communities, lineages, and descendants. So let's start the video and learn about Soulfire Farm.
Peace and blessings. My name is Leah Penman. I am the farm manager and co-director at Soulfire Farm, and we're so excited to show you a few of the sacred and beautiful spots on the land today. This is our Milpa, or Three Sisters Garden. Our friends at the Stockbridge Munsee Band of the Mohican Nation in Bowler, Wisconsin shared with us some of their blue corn, white corn, and Mohican bean seed, entrusting us to grow these ancestral mounds and save and share the seed back with their community. We feel so honored to be bringing this seed back to its homeland. Here we have our vegetable growing area where there's over 100 different varieties of heirloom crops. All of this wonderful produce gets boxed up every week into our solidarity shares, which feed 25 families in the Capital District who are surviving food apartheid. This week in our share box, we have fresh raspberries, garlic scapes, new potatoes, lettuce, peas, basil, and so many other wonderful medicines, fruits, and vegetables to share with folks who might otherwise not have access to this life-giving, nourishing food. We affectionately call this our South Carolina house because the climate is more like South Carolina in this plastic house than it is in New York. And this is where we grow a lot of our seed keeping varieties. We save seed for the True Love seed catalog, which focuses on ancestral and culturally significant varieties like the Moya Mensing tomato, the Platayiti tomato from my ancestral homelands, Scotch bonnet pepper. We also grow number 6 bee balm, Sweet Annie, and other crops for this wonderful distribution of seed for the community. This is my favorite place on the farm. It's called the Jardin La Cour, which means home or house garden in Haitian Creole. It's a series of terraces that have apple trees interspersed with over 20 varieties of beneficial medicinal herbs and plants. For example, chives, bee balm, echinacea, mint, all heal, rhubarb, and many more. And these plants work together. They share nutrients with one another, attract pollinators, repel pests, and hold the soil in place. We are committed to healing the climate, and as my colleague Larissa Jacobson would say, calling the carbon back into the soil where it belongs after centuries of devastation by European colonization and pillage. To that end, we're converting a lot of our annual beds into perennial polycultures. So here you can see raspberries interspersed with herbs like calendula, oregano, anise, all heal, echinacea, and more, with the goal of creating a self-maintaining ecosystem that attracts pollinators and increases biodiversity, capturing carbon in the soil as it goes. And most importantly, we get to enjoy this delicious, bountiful gift from the lands. You can't already tell, I love fruit. It's my favorite thing. And the raspberries, blueberries, and strawberries and jossberries are just popping off this year. Can't wait for you to be on the land to try with us.
Greetings, friends. My name is Naima Penman, and I'm honored to serve as Program Director here at Soulfire Farm. We are an Afro-Indigenous community farm dedicated to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. I want to give a big shout out to our incredible team and to the land that we're in partnership with every day to nourish our community. I also want to pay homage and respect to our friends of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican Nation, who are the original stewards of this land, and heartfelt love to our ancestors whose legacy guides our work every day. I want to give particular homage to one ancestor in particular, who is my sister, Leah Penman, the co-founder and co-director of Soulfire Farm, and my great-great-great-grandmother. Her name was Susie Boyd, and she was living in the Dahomey region of West Africa in a time of the transatlantic slave trade, where her and others in her community were witnessing family members and loved ones being kidnapped, snatched up, and sent on a perilous and uncertain journey. And they, in the face of that, had the courage and the foresight to braid seeds in each other's hair as social security for this unknown future, trusting that wherever those ships took them, there would be land, and that seeds would be the hope for the future. I created this painting to illustrate that story of our ancestral grandmothers braiding seeds into each other's hair for us, their descendants, to inherit. And with them came the seeds of okra, melon, black-eyed peas, sorrel, sesame, black rice, and so many more. And they also braided and brought with them indigenous ways of knowing the land and how to grow food, from vermicomposting to rotational grazing, raised bed to food preservation. And in this presentation, I'll be honoring the agriculture ingenuity of our ancestors. This is Farming While Black, Soulfire Farm's Practical Guide to Liberation on Land, authored by my beloved soul and womb sister, Leah Penman. You can see the painting here, and she writes, "This book, Farming While Black, is a reverently compiled manual for African heritage people ready to reclaim our rightful place of dignified agency in the food system." Our work here at Soulfire Farm is centered around feeding our community and stewarding the lands, equipping and training the next generation of farmer activists, and strengthening our movements for food and land sovereignty. Ultimately, it's about each and every one of us getting to be fully alive. And life as we know it is integrally connected to good food and good land. Unfortunately, injustice and racism are baked into the foundation of the food system in this country, and that has not fundamentally changed. The food system is built on land theft of indigenous people and the exploitation of Black and brown labor. We went from the horrific transatlantic slave trade and over 400 years of forced uncompensated labor to the sting of convict leasing and then sharecropping and the racial terror that drove Black people off of their lands, fueling the Great Migration away from the red clay soils of the South and into the paved streets of northern cities. And to fill the labor vacuum, instead of rethinking how we value the humans who grow the food we eat, the agriculture industry began turning to another population to exploit, establishing guest worker programs like Bracero, H2, H2A, where many workers experience poor living conditions, lack of medical care, wage theft, no rights to collective bargaining, days off, or fair wages. In fact, 85% of the people working the land and growing our food in this country today have brown skin, were born across these so-called borders, and speak Spanish. And we've created trade agreements so onerous, conditions abroad so unbearable through the globalization of capitalism, that people would leave the land that they love, the families that they love, to cross these hostile borders to do backbreaking work for little compensation with very little protection. In fact, right now, as we're experiencing these devastating climate-fueled wildfires across California and the Pacific Northwest, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, we're seeing that migrant farm workers are continuing to labor in the fields, toil in meat processing plants, harvest day in and day out in evacuation zones to keep America fed. Touted as essential, but treated as disposable. These workers have not only very little labor protection, never mind lung protection in the face of the dangers of COVID-19, wildfire smoke, and an unprecedented heat wave. I would think that the people who grow and cook our food should have access to all the food they need, but how ironic that they are the most food insecure. In certain parts of our nation, 1/2 to 2/3 of migrant and seasonal farm worker households are food insecure compared to 12% of the general population. No one should go to bed hungry, but people of color are disproportionately likely to live under food apartheid and suffer from diet-related illness. In fact, it's 3 times more likely for Black, Latinx, and indigenous people to experience food insecurity and go hungry as it is for white people. And white neighborhoods have an average of 4 times as many supermarkets as predominantly Black communities. The incidence of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease are the highest in our Black, indigenous, and Latinx communities. The food that we eat is trashing our bodies, and it's also trashing the planet. Industrial agriculture is responsible for about 1/4 of greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of the water use, and over 1/3 of the land use in our nation. And we see disparities as well in the environmental impacts of climate change: heat waves, wildfires, hurricanes, loss of coastlines and islands, as well as pesticide exposure and toxic pollutants that harm communities of color disproportionately. How do we feed ourselves without devastating the planet and our more than human relatives, or without exploiting or degrading other human beings? It is possible. I want to look at some past and present examples highlighting the leadership and ingenuity of our Black and Brown communities for answers to these questions. But first, I want to share with you a poem that I wrote sharing some of the history of the food system and land distribution in this nation through the voice of the soil. I hope you enjoy Black Gold. I am evidence of love under fingernails, kneecaps stained from kneeling to pray, sacred remains of yesterday, fertile with future. I am musk after rain, soft, firm, unconditional embrace, bosom of returning. I am the earthen floor, slapped with soles of feet, origin story and sorcery. I am vast in cosmic compost, sand, silt, stone, composition of decomposed bones and primordial ferns, reborn. I am sun turned to rot, particles of stardust heaped in terracotta pots, this thing the living clings to, nascent seedling, ancient tree, this melanin-rich thickness, dripping mineral and mystery. I am galactic blackness, hummus of fecundity. I am mud clung to cassava root in the lower holds of slave ships. The soggy clay I raised up sugarcane, fed cotton profits of enslavement. I am arid trails, damp with tears of dislocation, earth snatched from Japanese farmers' grasp, thrust into concentration. I am gang raped by colonization, who changed his name to capitalism but retains the same enslavement, the erasure and breakage of all my relations for global market chocolate whose growers face starvation. I am the sweet smell of freedom. I am promise past plantation, the ground under heaviest railroad, the cracks in pavement post-migration. I spawned the roots that pushed through shoots that subverted subjugation. I am loam lush with nitrogen in Dr. Carver's legume fields. I am the calcium in the Black Panther's free breakfast meals. I am cooperative acres, Fannie Lou Hamer made real. The once toxic lots, Hattie Carthen's garden plots healed. I am ashes of burned Monsanto seed stamped under the feet of Haitian revolutionaries. I am red hot from tomatoes from Taco Bell boycotts, fertilized by the fruits Immokalee farmers left to rot. I am proof of life after death. I am dawning from decay, mass graves in my belly, my open palms spawn gardens. Transmuter of toxins, cauldron of embryos, cradle of coffins, atmospheric alchemist sequestering carbon. I am bleached, stripped, strained by purveyors of pipelines and mountaintop explosions, erosion of homelands washed to oceans, borderlands encroaching. I am choking. I am swept up and stepped upon, guzzled by the gluttonous. I am paradise paved over, poison drenched, drained of sustenance. I buttress monocultures of monopolies to feed cultures of injustice. I am cultivated by machete. I am defended by cutlass. Silent utterance. I am thunderous. All these layers of concrete. I am under this. I am umber, ochre, saffron, crimson, cocoa brown, and ebony. I am gold, gold, gold. You are soiled, filthy, black dirt rich. You are soul, soul, soul. Take me in your palms. Breathe in my memory. Remember me, fall soft where you belong, my seed. I need you. The future depends on me. We are people of the soil. Our intimate relationship with soil stretches back millennia, encompassing Cleopatra's reverence for the earthworm and the carbon-rich raised beds of the Ovambo people. The Ovambo people of northern Namibia and southern Angola are clear that soil fertility is not an inherent quality, rather something that is nurtured through mounding, ridging, and the application of organic matter. The practice of the Ovambo is to demarcate the field, clear brush, and then build raised rectangular mounds, raised beds about 10 feet long, 5 feet wide, and a foot tall. And the pathways double as irrigation ditches. The Ovambo farmers add ample manure, ashes, termite earth, cattle urine, muck from the wetlands, and other organic matter to increase fertility in their mounds. And this system concentrates fertile topsoil, it aerates the soil, and prevents waterlogging. And the Ovambo farmers also integrate a rotating fallow after a few seasons harvest of millet, during which cattle and goats graze on the brush of the resting cropland and deposit additional manure to replenish the soil. And shout out to Cleopatra, who is thought to have originated the practice of vermicomposting, composting with earthworms. Under her reign in ancient Egypt, Cleopatra believed that worms were sacred, and she made a law that anyone who killed an earthworm would be put to death, having realized they provided the best fertilizer. And she had a cadre of priests dedicated to studying the habits of worms, and scientists have examined the depth of earthworm castings in the Nile Valley and found that it far exceeds that of other places in the region. These are two of many examples of agricultural ingenuity that originated on the continent of Africa that are uplifted in this incredible book authored by my sister Leah Penman called Farming While Black. Others that she mentions are soil testing and remediation, African dark earth, polycultures, relay crops, Swidden agriculture, Fenya jus terraces, rotational grazing, the integration of fowl, irrigation, the invention of the hoe, financing through susus, harvest cycles and celebrations, konbit and collective work, preserving the harvest in ash and ferment, and so many more. Ways of taking care of ourselves and each other while also taking care of the earth that sustains us. And there are many in each generation who remember the original instructions of the seeds braided in our ancestors' hair, who resist colonization and degradation, and who guide us today. I want to shout out rememberer Dr. George Washington Carver, agricultural scientist and inventor, founding professor at Tuskegee University, and the father of regenerative agriculture, a methodology that involves minimal soil disturbance, the use of cover crops, and crop rotation. He convinced a generation of farmers to take their fields out of cash crops on rotation, to plant leguminous cover crops to restore the soil, to mulch with muck dragged out from swamps, to compost and integrate ruminants for silvopasture. All these systems harness plants to capture greenhouse gases, which Paul Hawkins says no other mechanism known to humankind is as effective in addressing global warming as the capturing of carbon dioxide from the air through photosynthesis. So this is a powerful practice that ancestor Dr. Carver was teaching many Black farmers throughout the South. He essentially developed the first extension agency, an agricultural school on wheels that would go around to busted, dilapidated farms and do an extreme farm makeover that would be a demonstration site in these regenerative agricultural principles for the entire county. I want to shout out rememberer Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, if you have 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, no one can push you around or tell you what to do. She understood that whoever controls the food controls the population. If you are not storing your greens and gumbo soup for the winter, you will put down your ballot, your NAACP membership card, and come begging for food when those supermarkets closed or when the COVID pandemic hits. Fannie Lou Hamer took in sharecroppers who were kicked off their lands and created a cooperative farm with 70 farmers called Freedom Farm in Sunflower County, Mississippi, where they raised vegetables, livestock, and were able to pool resources for scholarships and burial fees amongst the community. I want to shout out rememberers Shirley and Charles Sherrod, who in 1969 in Albany, Georgia, founded New Communities, a 5,700-acre intentional community co-stewarded by 500 Black farmers. This was the largest piece of land owned by Black people, the first community land trust, and they studied kibbutzim in Israel and indigenous land tenure in Africa to develop a system of non-ownership and community stewardship of their land, and they're now celebrating their 50th anniversary, so shout out to them. I want to shout out the organizing of tenant farmers, 3 million strong, a white and Black integrated union that demanded increased wages for cotton pickers as well as better working conditions. The white ruling class maintains its power by convincing poor white people that they have more in common with the white ruling class than other people in their class. So as a threat to white supremacy, this union, this integrated union, was broken up by disproportionately punishing Black members, which created disassociation, and they ended up breaking into 2 unions. But this was after many decades of resistance. I want to shout out the rememberers who used boycotts and continue to, like Cesar Chavez, Larry Itlian, Dolores Huerta, the farm worker uprisings that brought the grape industry to its knees and forced California labor laws, the first state to have labor laws for farm workers, and the current coalition for Immokalee workers in Florida has been built on that legacy. I want to shout out the rememberers of the Black Panther Party and the survival programs that fed 20,000 children free breakfast in Oakland every day and has become the basis for programs in public schools and inspiration for many of us, including Soulfire Farm. I want to shout out the Paysan farmers in Haiti who burned Monsanto seeds coming in on barge ports in Haiti. There's this insidious strategy in the face of disaster where corporations come give relief under the guise of paternalistic aid and create cycles of dependency undermining local communities. So hybrid and GMO rice were given as a donation along with the chemicals needed to grow it. And these farmers saw through it and burned it at the port. These farmers also won the Global Food Sovereignty Prize and are part of a larger international network called Via Campesina, and shout out to them. And it carries on, right? So many examples. Malik Yakini against odds, building a 7-acre farm in Detroit. Karen Washington starting the Black Urban Growers in New York. Dennis Derrick delivering 80,000 boxes of food to people with terminal illness in the Bronx. How can we also remember? At Soulfire, I mentioned that we're committed to uprooting racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. And we go about that in 3 distinct ways. Number 1, we implement Afro-Indigenous agroforestry, silvopasture, wildcrafting, polyculture, and spiritual farming practices to regenerate 80 acres of mountainside land here, producing fruits, plant medicine, pasture-raised livestock, honey, mushrooms, of course, vegetables, and preserves for our community. In this process, we sequester 50,000 pounds of carbon in the soil, and we've restored over a dozen native plant species. With the harvest, over 90% is given through our Solidarity Share programs, giving the harvest to community members who are living under food apartheid or who are impacted by state violence. We do this by gathering up what is in season every week, delivering it through doorstep delivery directly to families and to our organizational partners. And it reaches over 50 food insecure households. And I'll read a quote from one of our Farm Share members who says, "I have loved the fresh food that I've been blessed to enjoy since joining the CSA. I have seen a complete change in my mood and general outlook. This, I believe, is tied to relieved stress from not having money for good produce and also the healthier feeling that comes with farm-to-table food." In addition to sharing the food we grow, we're also sharing knowledge on how to grow your own food. We have a program called Soul Fire in the City, where we've supported over 40 families in establishing their own raised bed gardens in our neighboring cities of Albany and Troy. And we provide the lumber, the soil, the compost, the seedlings, the seeds, and the support, the ongoing guidance for them to be able to grow some of their own food and medicine. The second way we're seeding sovereignty is by equipping our communities with the skills and the resources to reclaim leadership as farmers and food justice organizers in their communities. We have a number of training opportunities, both on and off farm and virtual. We have week-long farming immersions for aspiring Black, Indigenous, and people of color growers. We have youth programs. We have virtual skill shares that train up on farming and homesteading practices. And we really use land as a tool for healing from racial trauma and also to be able to imagine bolder futures in relationship to land. And through that, really working to reverse the dangerously low percentage of farms being owned and operated by people of color. Graduates of our farming immersion programs become part of our Soul Squad alumni mentorship program and receive seed funding, coaching, job placement, media promotion, as well as support in finding land. And some of our alumni go on to join our Speakers Collective. In response to COVID-19 and an increased recognition of the importance that we reclaim ownership over the means of our survival in terms of growing our own food, there's been such a swelling of interest. And so in response, we have started Ask a Sister Farmer, a weekly program where people can ask questions about growing food and gardening. We have a BIPOC farmer skill share. We created a resource list for BIPOC farmers in times of COVID. And during this pandemic, we also launched our video series called Liberation on Land, which is a series of how-to instructional videos really highlighting and uplifting Afro-Indigenous farming techniques in both Spanish and English, and featuring over 30 BIPOC instructors training on everything from pasture-raised poultry to mushroom cultivation to how to make medicine from plants and more. And it's great that some of our alumni join our Speakers Collective, because the third important part of our mission is to mobilize public support. And every year we reach thousands of community members through speaking at conferences, publishing articles and books, doing radio interviews and podcasts, facilitating workshops to really share tangible methods of dismantling racism in the food system and increasing community food sovereignty. We also host on-farm educational and community building events for hundreds of participants, our community workdays and celebrations. And we're collaborating both with regional and national food justice networks to advance reparations, to establish action platforms, and to work on campaigns for farmer survival and dignity. In collaboration with the Heal Food Alliance and the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, we've been working on a policy platform that honors farm workers and remunerates land for Indigenous people, as well as advance reparations for Black farmers. We have also catalyzed, incubated, and supported the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, which is a hybrid model land trust bringing together community land trust commons model for farmland preservation and a conservation land trust model to conserve and steward ecosystems with the goal of manifesting community visions that uplift regenerative, global, indigenous, Black, and people of color relationships with land, skills, and lifeways. And just in these first couple years, we've been able to transfer 2 parcels of farmland to BIPOC land stewards and transfer resources to more than 7 BIPOC farmers through our reparations map. And we've also facilitated 2 cultural respect easements for indigenous communities. We are one of many BIPOC-led grassroots groups working on these issues. There's the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance, SAFON, the Southeastern African American Organic Farmers Network, the Indigenous Youth Council, the Black Farmer Fund, the Native Land Conservancy, to name a few of many. And if we're going to change the story, we need all of us. The seed is handed to you. How will you nurture it? Malcolm X said, all revolution is based on land. And if we don't have any land, we don't have the means of production, we're out of the picture. And right now, 90% of the land in this country is controlled by the descendants of European colonizers. If we are not acting to change the system, we are complicit, casting our silent vote to maintain the status quo. We need to uphold everyone's right to land. We need to honor the people who grow our food. We need to eliminate food apartheid. We need to support farmers of color. We've created an entire document of food sovereignty action steps for anyone who's ever asked, how can I make the food system more just? It's divided into 7 sections: policy platform, individual actions, reparations, alliance building, organizational transformation, grant making and funding, self-reflection and education. You can check out the full platform at soulfirefarm.org. What I ask of this community is to really think about what it would take to join this movement, to take leadership from Black and brown folks who are doing the work on the ground to heal our communities and transfer resources to these people. I don't want to say next year that farm workers are the most food insecure, or that indigenous people continue to be violently dispossessed of their land, or that only 1% of farmland is owned by Black people. Next year, may it be 3%, and then 7%, until we build a world where all people have the right to belong to the land and have dignity and justice in the food system. Thank you so much for the sacred gift of your attention. To close, I will offer a poem dedicated to all you soil stewards and life lovers out there. Every patch of earth unencumbered by concrete, where soil and atmosphere meet, be a portal to presence, a terrain of remembrance, a vote for survival, and an unpromised future. These gardens are blueprints of interdependent destiny, intergenerational memory, saving seeds for food as remedy. See, my people know what it's like to eat and still be starving. So we turn in hardship into harvest, lawns and schoolyards into gardens, homegrown bounty in our palms. We come from soil and stardust. And so we conjure, giving props to hood magicians who grow provisions for our kitchens. We smuggle spinach into prisons, transform the places that we live in, trade psychosis for symbiosis, and stay focused. Sprout sunflowers that tower on neighborhood blocks, harvest raindrops on rooftops to water our crops, propagate plant medicine for the metropolis, guarding our plots, cause our gardens are not for profit or loss. Cross-pollinate the promise, fam. We got this. Take a deep breath. Restore calmness. With lemon balm bounty in our palms, sun-gold cherry tomatoes in our pockets, sugar snap peas climbing a chain link fence in this oasis of reclamation, we tend havens for justice and sustenance amid glaring disparity. Every seed saved will set us free. In an age of opulence and scarcity, every seed saved will set us free. In a time of intensifying violence and climate calamity, every seed saved will set us free. Hold on tight to the source. We have all that we need.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. We have Naima here with us. Thank you so much for being here. And if you're ready, we're going to start the Q&A session.
Yes, greetings, everyone. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
So the first question that I'm getting here is, much of Soul Fire Farm's work is rooted in what you describe as fierce love, courageous self-reflection, and healing connection to land. Could you talk more about these elements and why they are central to your work?
Absolutely. So we're guided so much by a reverent relationship with the land that we're blessed to steward and cultivate food and medicine for our communities. And that connection to the energies of the soil and all of our more than human relatives, as well as to our ancestors who are collaborating with us in this work, is central because it's part of the healing that we intend to not only impact those of us who are here on the land, but also who receive the nourishment from the land. And it's something that all those who come to the farm to learn with us, to train, to live with us for a week at a time, step into and also embody. And I feel that joy and that connection is so central to our reclamation of this sense of being part of something so much bigger than us. And I think that is an important part of the fuel that drives us forward.
Yes, thank you for your answer, Naima. We have more questions coming in. This one is from Facebook, and Althea asked, how can the videos be accessed? Referring to the Soul Fire Farms videos you mentioned in the presentation.
So we have a few videos. I'm not sure the person who asked which one they mean. Potentially the Liberation on Land videos, which is the series that we started this year that there's expert growers, farmers, and land stewards. And that's on our YouTube page. So if you just go to YouTube/C/SoulFireFarm, you'll see a whole playlist of videos under our Liberation on Land title. And those are accessible to all of you.
Perfect. That's fantastic. More questions coming in. How can individuals or small community groups get started on this type of work? How do we uproot racism in the food system? Is there a role for white people to be allies in this work?
Oh, absolutely. We need all of us if we're going to change the story of injustice in our food system. And there are many points of intervention, from access to land, to dignity for farm workers, to the technical assistance and training for farmers, as well as the production, consumption end of things, like who gets to access food. And there are really powerful ways that we can mobilize on community levels or institutional levels, like getting our schools, our institutions to sign on to fair purchasing guidelines that ensure dignity for farm workers, as well as a baseline of practices that are socially and ecologically sustainable in how we grow and distribute food. There's also work to be done on policy level to be able to support both regenerative agriculture systems, as well as to make fresh and healthy food more accessible to people. And we've compiled hundreds of action steps to support folks in that inquiry of what is a way that I can really step in and participate in healing this food system? Because many of us, we all have our unique gifts and perspectives and ways of contributing, and so I encourage all who are listening to take a moment to go to soulfirefarm.org. There's a tab that says get involved, and beneath that, action steps. And these action steps, we didn't just pull from the air. They're the result of hundreds and hundreds of conversations with Black and Indigenous POC-led coalitions and farmers and farm workers to really, center what are the ways that we can engage following the guidance of those who are most impacted by these issues. So we hope that's a great resource and benchmark for you all to get involved.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Naima. Let's see what else. Another Facebook question. Jesse asks, what was the toughest thing about getting the organization going?
Well, for the first, I want to say 7 years of the organization, this was before we were an organization, we were just a family farm. And the amount of focus, determination, energy, and fortitude it took to be able to work with the land where we are, which is very marginal, mountainside, rocky clay soils. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have water. We didn't even have a driveway to the land. So we're talking about years of building soil, of building infrastructure. There was no human habitat on the land. So, working to physically build Soulfire took an immense amount of grit and determination. And then we were working on an entirely volunteer basis for a number of years before incorporating as the Institute and a nonprofit, doing more educational work that's provided some revenue. But I would say that, just the challenge of being driven by the deep understanding and acknowledgement of how important it is that we're able to grow food and make that food accessible to those who it typically wouldn't be, and to be able to create the type of habitat that welcomes our communities in a way that's inspiring and also responsible to our ecosystem. It's a joyous work because the passion is fueling you, the purpose is driving you. But I would say, that the heart, the difficulty, just comes in all the perseverance that it's took and all the learning and overcoming obstacles to get where we are now.
That's amazing. I think you guys are doing something amazing. Let's see. Peggy on Facebook asks, do you have hope for the future of social justice and food justice in our country? What are the major challenges or opportunities?
Yes, I choose optimism as a strategy with the conviction that our generation, not just our generation, but those of us who said yes to being alive right now, of all ages, are saying yes to being part of the necessary transformation that this world and our peoples are so thirsty for. And I do believe that we can do it. It's not a given. It's going to take all of us, but I believe that if we're willing to say yes and say yes with courage and with humility to the task ahead, that we will be able to create a food system based on dignity for all people, on reverence for the earth. And I'm inspired by, on a movement, like a national movement level, ways that we've been really listening to one another and strategizing to make very clear policy recommendations and really clear alternatives and avenues of how things could look different. So being able to lay out, do we want to choose this path, that is predicated on exploitation in the name of endless profit without being able to see too much farther from right now? Or can we build a regenerative society? Can we find new ways of really honoring the small farmers and growers who are doing ecosystem services to help to heal our climate and to heal our earth? And ways that more and more people are saying yes to reclaiming the knowledge of how to do that work. And I'm inspired too by ways that people are willing to recognize that the way that wealth and land has been so erroneously and disproportionately distributed in our communities and has so much to do with our destinies, what we're able to achieve in our lives, and saying, like, no, I'm going to make a commitment in my lifetime to redistribute some of this stolen land or stolen wealth to create more opportunities. You know, there's things that we need to do on a national level, but in the meantime, there's so much that we can do on individual and community levels to be able to enact the types of relationships of reciprocity, justice, and fairness that we get to enact ourselves. So that gives me hope. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it still sounding?
We have time for one more question. Let's see. How has the pandemic changed or affected your work?
Yeah. So, and I'll just check. Africa, can you hear me okay now?
I can hear you okay. I'm wondering if our attendees can hear you. It sounds, yeah.
How's it now?
I think that's better. Perfect.
Okay, great.
So the last question that we had was, how has the pandemic changed or affected your work? And I'm glad someone asked that because I was really, really wondering.
Yeah, so on a typical year, we welcome over 1,000 people throughout the warm season to come and learn with us. We do some deep skill shares and farming immersions, learning how to build together, learning how to wildcraft medicine, and a lot of youth come here. And because of the pandemic, we've had to shift out of on-farm programming to a lot more virtual programming. The 3D skill shares and the Liberation on Land video series are examples of many kind of virtual skill shares and meetups we posted. And while we grow, we have been growing food for our community since we started. This year, we've really focused it on getting 90% of our food direct doorstep delivery to families who are really experiencing acute food insecurity right now. So that's been an important pivot, not just giving people food, but also teaching people how to grow some of their own food. So we have a program that supports people in the city having raised bed home gardens. And so whereas in a typical year, usually we'll do maybe 5, this year we did over 40. And bringing together volunteers to help build raised bed gardens for families who are impacted by food apartheid or who maybe have chronic illness or elders, lots of children. And that's been a real team effort, you know, to support some of the most vulnerable in our community to grow food. And the last thing that I'll say is that I'm also grateful for ways that the work we have been doing and understanding clearly now for a while is an important role to play. It has only been heightened in this time. So it hasn't required this major mission shift or gymnastics because we were already situated in such a way where we're working in direct partnership with this land who is so generous to be able to grow food, and an affirmation that this is essential work, that not only the distribution of food, but also the dissemination of knowledge, reclaiming our African and indigenous ways of growing food, and also the deep realization, you know, this reckoning moment of how much healing needs to happen on so many levels between like We talking, in our relationships to the earth. We're talking about the relationship between our communities on racial levels, around state violence, all of this really being lifted up, and I feel like our role in the racial justice movement and in the food justice movement and in the land sovereignty movement has just been heightened in this time, where we're looking for guidance and possibility of how we can change things around. And so I'm just so grateful for the deep relationships, the networks, the movements that we belong to and that we're part of, in helping to create some guidance for our way forward.
Absolutely. Naima, thank you so much for being here today. This was a fantastic session. I really enjoyed it, and I hope our viewers did too. I'm sure they did. Thank you all so much for attending, for your great questions, and thank you to our sponsors for making this possible as well. If you would like to purchase Farming While Black by Leah Penman, just go to www.allfirehousebooks.com/bookfest2020. Book plates are available from select authors, and please indicate in the comment section of your order if you're interested in a signed copy. Finally, please go to www.focabookfest.org and fill out the survey, because we rely on our community to guide us in planning future book festivals. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Thank you, Naima, and I hope you all have a great rest of your weekend.